Alright, so we're going to go ahead and get started on step 404. And 404, what our goals, what our objectives are in 404 is to go ahead and use arrays. We're going to learn about arrays in this lesson, and we're going to use arrays to actually replace our menu. We see nothing really has changed except for up to this point. And what we're doing is we're going to fill our menu in and grab our content using arrays, which is pretty exciting because it's a good introduction to using arrays and how the indexes work, and how simply by looping through an array and grabbing the pieces of data and remembering what the index was allows you to leverage that array and other arrays. We've been learning about arrays. You should be pretty knowledgeable now at this point on at least what an array is. So we'll go ahead, and we want to do is our first step. And our first step, of course, let's just make sure our localhost is where we want it to be, and it is. And we're throwing no errors or anything like that. And for our first step, what we have to do is we have to go out and get a file which is supplied in the lesson below. There's a link to it. And what that file is the array that builds all this information. I don't expect you to do that. And the easiest way to go about it is to click on the link, or actually grab the link to the sample site. And we can see that our quotes.js array is right here. And what it is basically multi-dimensional array, meaning that we have an array and then arrays inside of an array. So what we want to do with this is we want to go ahead, go to this file, and I'm going to Alt-S to save it. And I'm going to go out to my website that I'm working on, my 4x. And by the way, let's make sure we did check out our branch, but it doesn't hurt to make sure we don't want to go saving it to our master branch. So we are in our 404 branch. In our arrays, what we're going to do is we're going to go inside our arrays, inside our data, our assets folder, and we're going to create a data folder. And we're going to save the quotes.js in the data folder. And then we can just close that window. So at this point, if we go out to Dreamweaver and we refresh our local files by right-clicking, and then all the way at the bottom of the menu is refresh local files, we'll see that we dropped our data array into our file system. And if we enable GitHub, we'll see it'll be green because it's an added file. It's just coming into the system. Now, what we need to do before we can use that file is we need to bring it into our application. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to come into our index.html, and we're going to do two different things in here while we're in here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and clean up all of our comments, because we're keeping more comprehensive manifest. And in keeping a more comprehensive manifest, what we can do is really just clean up our code and minimize it to be nothing more than our code that we're using. And so I cleaned out my comments, and I'm going to go ahead and apply source formatting just so that it cleans up a little bit more. And as we can see, we really don't have much of anything inside of here. But what we are going to do is we want to pull this quotes array, this file. We want this to come in before our app, because what we're going to do is use that array, and we need it to come in before our app.js file because we want to be able to see it inside of our scripts in our app.js. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add this in, and we're going to go ahead out and just grab it, data quotes array, and let's save that. And at this point, that actually is all the changes that we're making in our index.html for this step. So we can assume that that is done. We can call that completely done at this point. We can go to localhost. We're not going to really see much of anything because we did not change much of anything at all. We remove comments. But when you remove code and you manipulate code, it's always good to just keep going and testing. Make sure you're not throwing any errors. Make sure that things are working as you expected them to. The more you check, the less time it takes to fix mistakes when you make them. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back into Dreamweaver, and now we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually start using our JavaScript to leverage those arrays. And the first thing, again, that we're going to do is let's just go through and clean up our comments. Get our code nice and clean. Not many comments in here. I think I got them all. I'm going to go ahead and format it, apply source formatting just so my code looks good. I know that I'm not going to add any app data at the moment. And as far as our application function, we are take that array that we're pulling in, which is the quotArr for quotArray, right? So very surprising. And we're going to use a function we had in the lesson prior to getting started here. And what we want to do is take that array, call it into our code, call it into our script, and we're actually redeclaring the variable by doing what we call a sort. And this sort that we're doing is essentially just a little comparison where what it's going to do is go in and it's going to look at the names. And if we go out and we look at our sample, our target site, let me get over here. I'm going to bring this over here so we can keep looking at it. If you notice, we have all the names in alphabetical order. And so what we're asking the script to do for us, is to go out and compare one with one. So we're saying what it's doing, it's basically going through and it's taking each item and it's starting at the top of the list. And when it starts at the top of the list, we're saying A and B, we're saying take one item and then the next item. And what we want you to do is compare that first item to the next item. And as it goes through, basically what it's doing for us is let's just say it brings in D. It looks at D and it says, okay, that's the beginning of our function. That's where we start. And then let's say it brings in the letter A. Well, it looks at A and it compares it to D and it takes a look at it and says, you go above D. When it brings the letter B in, it looks at these letters and it says, oh, you go in there. If it brings in the letter Z, it looks and it does a comparison based on the alphabet and it says, oh, no, you're Z, so you go to the end. And it just keeps building that way. As it's going through, it'll just keep building and building until it completes the whole list. And what you end up with is everything sorted, alphabetized. So, more on the sort function in the lesson for you to look at and learn from and doing a local compare. So we'll go ahead and we'll save that. I don't anticipate any problems with it. But what we want to do, because we went and put that line of code in, we want to make sure that it's not blowing up or blowing anything up. And so if we come out here to our local host and we do a empty cache and reload, and we've already hit the init function, so we should be good as far as that goes. What we want to do is we want to check on this, and if we check on it, what we see is that we have our arrays out here and it breaks them down and you can actually see that it's alphabetized them. So pretty cool. We can call that because of the fact that it's actually global. We're not declaring the variable inside the function. We're actually declaring the variable in the file that we pull in, which this makes it global, which means we can access it from anywhere, which is exactly what we want. So now that we've brought it in and we have it sorted, we have it alphabetized, we want to go ahead and start doing some work in our menu. So let's close this up so we don't have to look at it, and we don't need to look at our display bar, and we don't need to look at our login, and we don't need to look at our validate or the application user interface at this point. Where we want to work is inside our build menu. So we'll go ahead and we'll close everything else up so that we're just working inside of our build menu. Now, what we need to do with our build menu is we need to start breaking down that return, because at this point now what we're going to do is we're going to take this return here and we're going to make it more dynamic in nature, meaning we're going to go ahead and build a menu instead of just declaring a menu and adding it. And so what I'm doing is I'm adding in let, which is just another way of declaring var, and I'm just creating a sorted menu, so SM for that sorted menu. And I know that my nav is being opened by the nav bar, the nav element itself, and the class, the UL, where we're going to build the list. So what I'm doing essentially is pulling it out of here and putting it up inside here to initially declare that variable. Since we're doing that, since we're declaring that, what we do know as well is that we have a closing point. So we're slowly breaking down this return function. We're getting rid of it. And what we want to do is make sure that we are closing this list and nav element as well. So we're going to go ahead and put that down here. And so as you can see, we're just adding to it. We're concatenating to anything that has been added to it at this point. Excellent. So now that we have that, what we need to do is we need to create those elements that we're looking at, the links that we're looking at over there on the side. And the way that we're going to do that is we are going to, which is the most common thing that we do with arrays, is we're going to go ahead and loop through the array to build the things that we want to build. So let's just clean that up a little and let's talk about it. We know that we have li, and then we have a link, and that's the first link that we see in our menu. So let's just go and verify that real quick. We see the active, then link, and disabled. So let's trim this down even a little bit more, because all we need is one example link to know what it is that we're building, that we need to build with these array elements. We're going to loop through each one of these. So basically the for let I equals 0, right? So, and then we're saying as long as I is less than the length of the array, which is the length of this array, we want to go ahead and loop through it. We're pulling in that array, and if you remember, we in the application user interface, on the initialized application, we sorted it, so now it's going to come through A's first, B's next, things of that nature. So we take our items here, which we can see, our opening list, our link itself, and we bring those down, and then we also have to populate it in the value. So if it helps you, just comment that out while you're coding and you're learning this, and you can see how we have to replace pieces of information now. Now, because we're using an array and we're using indexes, this will be 0, this will be 1, this will be 2, 3, 4, 5. And furthermore, what we need to do is we're grabbing the name, the person who quoted it, and then we later want to be able to grab the quote itself and display it in the content area. So what we can be rest assured of is that as long as that array is there and it's sorted, the number, which is starting at 0, the first time through, will reference this value, this array, inside the array. So because of that, we can create a data attribute and call it destination, and we can actually just put the incrementer number inside there. Now as we're going through, we want to pull the name out of the array. And the reason that we have I is because it will go through, as it's looping through, it'll say this one, this one, this one, this one. And if you look, after the I, we have 1. We have an index of 1. So what we're saying the first time through, it's 0, and then it looks at this subarray, and that's 0 and that's 1. So the author is always 1 because it's the second value in the subarray of the multi-dimensional array is what we would call it. Additionally, we are doing a little cleanup with this split here. And what we're doing is that in some cases, not many, but you'll see as you go through the array, some of our authors additional information inside them. And a good example of this is in a couple different places. We have Sid, Caesar, comma. And what we're doing is we're saying, hey, when you see that, split it at the comma and give us the second value. Now that's not always going to be right, but it's a good introduction to using split because sometimes you need to take a string and you need to take it apart and grab a hold of it, grab a hold of that other piece of data. So at this point, if I hit save and I come out, and we'll close this up because hopefully now what we're going to see is our array come out over here. Empty cache. Go in. And we have undefined. And the reason we have undefined, why do we have undefined, people? I'll tell you why. Because we're not returning, we're building and we're not returning the SM. Because this function is built on the idea that it's going to return something up top. So now if we go out and we give it a shot again, hopefully that'll do it. And there we see it. There we have our menu. We can see also that as we go through and we click on it, our click event is actually displaying the index number that was assigned to it. So that's the second part of this is to go out and we want to go ahead and we need to manipulate our click event. Don't have to do too much to it, but we'll go ahead and we'll fold this up and we'll go to our click event. And we'll look, and the cool thing is we already know that we are using the dest attribute. I'm going to get rid of this, by the way, for this, since we don't need it. And don't worry about that red that's showing. It's just asking me if I want to revert something. We have that dest, and we're putting that number in, the index number, and we can see that that's coming through here, and that's exactly, it's saying dest number was clicked. But what's really cool now is that at this point, what we can do is we can take that information and replace, we'll leave it up here for reference while we're doing this so that you can see the difference, is we're going to replace the first line is the string where we actually put the H1 in and say it was clicked. But now what we're going to do is we're actually going to start building and we're going to create a div. We're going to put the H1 inside of it. And then we're going to call that array again, that global array. And we're going to use that same thing that we were using up here, object dataset dest. And what we're going to do is we're going to say that, hey, we want in the object dataset dest, we want 0. And 0 meaning we want the quote, the first item in the subarray. And then we close off our H1 and we put in another div just to hold underneath it because we want to offset it to the right. And we'll go ahead and we'll put a style in to take care of that then. But we're doing the same thing we're doing up here, except that we're calling the second element, which is index of 1, in this array. And because of that, now we have this populated string that we can go ahead and tie right into our main, and we can get rid of our other code that we were working on. And again, remember, what we're doing is we're calling the array, and then we're saying, give us this index through using that number that we tucked away in there. So array item 14, if we call array item 14, we'll get exactly the same information that we used up here. And we're calling the quote there and the author there. So if we go ahead and we save that, and we come out to our local host and we do a refresh, and we empty cache, at this point we can hit submit. We see our items over here, and when we click, it actually pulls the author and the quote itself. Cool. So we have a little bit of cleaning to do now at this point. We have, we don't like this tucked up there. This doesn't look exactly nice. Usually it's always nice to have that offset to the right and a little bit smaller than the quote itself. And the way that we're going to do that is through CSS, so we don't have to disrupt anything else at all. The other thing that we want to pay attention to is we've built our slider, our left menu, and if you look, it actually scrolls down underneath. So that's the first thing that we're going to take care of. And the way that we're going to take care of that is we're going to go out to our CSS code, and we're done inside our JavaScript at this point. We've saved that. We're going to go out to our CSS code, and we're going to go to our sidebar. And in our sidebar, what we're going to do is we're going to tell it to push up the bottom from the bottom of the page 72 pixels by using this margin. And what that should do is actually compensate for the size of the footer and keep that sidebar right where we want it. I mean, keep that scroller, the bottom element will be at the top of the footer and in there. So if we go in and we look, we know we've achieved it just by looking that we have that arrow there now. And all it's doing is just pushing the bottom of that list up so that we can get all the way down. So then the next thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and we're going to add in two styles to take care of the author and the info that is presented in the main content area. And we'll go back and take a look at the code real quick before we put those styles in so that we can see that we in fact did put the classes in there and we're leveraging those classes. So let's go back to our app.js and let's take a look, and we can see there's our infoDiv. And if we come down further, we can see there's our author div. And so if we go into our CSS, and I think we will put it right in here inside of placeholders because it just kind of logically makes sense there. And we go ahead and we put that in. We say author with 84% because we don't want it up against the side. And we say text align, meaning take that div and align it, the contents of it to the right. And we reduce the font size by 5 EM, meaning whatever the highest parent element is that has a font size declared, we want to do half of that. And then we're doing margin auto so that the actual div centers itself in the page. The thing we're doing with the infoDiv is we just want to push it down. Right now, we know that it's sitting up against the top, and we don't really like the way that that looks. So we want to push it down a little, and so we're going to go ahead and say 20%. And if we come out and we take a look, and we do empty cache and refresh, and we hit submit, and we click on one, we see that it pushes it down 20% of the available space. We have our text right align over here, and our font size reduced. So excellent. And we're doing this all through just leveraging an array, and we made a couple simple code changes, and we can see how powerful sometimes just a little bit of code with the right information can really help us move ahead. So at this point, I think we're good. We're going to go ahead and we're going to save. And when we save, we're going to actually go ahead and close the index.html. And the last thing that we want to do is we want to do one more test for errors because we want to make sure that nothing got disturbed while we were closing and saving files and putting them out there. And so we hit submit, and we are working great. Awesome. So at this point, we'll go ahead and we'll do a get status in Commander. And we see what's changed. We see that we have our our styles have changed, and we see that there was a folder added with a file in it. So we'll do a git add, and we'll just say all with that dot, and we'll do another git status, and we can see that now our quotes is in there, everything is in there that we wanted. So we'll do git commit -m, and we'll put inside of it added quotes.js file to use to build the sidebar menu and content for the main display area. We modified the application init function to sort the array, modified the menu builder function to build the menu on the array, and we modified the linkClicked function to display the quote when the menu item we made a few CSS entries and cleaned up the index file. Good enough. So at that point, we have that information in there. If we do a git status, we should be good. Awesome. So now we're good. We've completed this lesson, and I'll see you in the next video where we're going to merge and do our production push.